And here we go. It is Monday, the 4th of October. John Lavenia here with you. I see a few people have tuned in so far. Lindsay's not here. We can't have a book study group without her. But Mark is here. Missy and Bob are here. Catherine's here. Stuart's here. And John Lavenia at your service. Tonight is the last night. I'm kind of a little bit sad about this. Kind of the last night for Dorothea Brand. I mean, she just... from like good to the last drop, good to the last, I mean, all of it. What a book. Oh my goodness. Not to mention, I think everybody's IQ went up 5 points just reading this, right? I mean, grab a dictionary and go to town because this girl's got a vocabulary. There's Lindsay. Here she is. We could start the party now that Lindsay's here. But chapters 10, 11, and 12, Dorothea just kept on delivering right till the end. And those 12, what did you call them? Disciplines?
Yeah.
I'm on silent, so I'm only answering direct questions.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. So who wants to kick us off? Talk about some of your takeaways from these last three chapters, chapters 10, 11, and 12. Floor is open.
Well, I'll go.
Missy, as is tradition.
Seconds.
Get us started.
We've been going for walks, and I've been being silent. That's easy for Bob, not so easy for me. But I notice my mind is not silent. And so I need to do all those other exercises. But I'll tell you something. Does Kelly come to this? Pivot Kelly?
Sometimes.
My dear friend, because
she's invited.
We walked one way, and I've seen these places, the trees, the houses a trillion times. When we turned around, I was suddenly, literally blasted in the face with a new view of life, where I just passed these trees, and there's a low-hanging tree where you got to bend over to get over it. But there's a pine tree right behind it, sticking up. And if you can just reframe your life in these ways that she's telling us, we're going to see where that pine tree is seeing from. And it ain't easy. I mean, I could not keep my thoughts silent for more than 5 seconds. I don't know why. I guess I do know why, because it's been on automatic for many, many, many decades. And I don't know where the off switch is.
Right. So, I know our friend Stuart here has been rekindling his interest in Stoic philosophy. And who was it that said, I think it might have been Ramana Maharshi, who said all of man's problems stem from his not being able to sit quietly in a room alone, right? So, oh my
That's
goodness.
where the power is. That's where the secret is.
But did you also notice, Missy and everyone, that she's not talking about like getting into like a hypnotic trance or anything like that? It's about being awake. It's not about being hypnotized.
Controlling.
Cause, like reassigning cause to yourself, being the cause point in present time and consistently being that, right? And there's many philosophers who have said it different ways. She gives us a specific directive in chapter 5 and reminds us again and again to act as though it were impossible to fail. I love how she summed it up in chapter 12 too. It was just a couple of pages, but my goodness. Yeah. Thank you, Missy, for that. So that was one of the disciplines from chapter 11. Who else has some thoughts on all this?
I'll share.
Hey, Mark.
Hi. I really love this book. It was very introspective, very good for me. What strict? Well, first of all, what I was thinking about is being extrovert, introvert, and how to do for the two. I'm an extrovert, so for me, being silent would be difficult. But I think for an introvert, like my wife, would be easy, right? As Missy kind of said, it'd be easy for a partner. So that really struck out for me. But some things here about self-sabotage. I love this quote. Many of those who believe themselves overworked or are doing less than they should, ideally do, and could do easily if they saw what is expected of them with imagination instead of anxiety. And I sense a lot of that within me, that, if I do too many things, I use anxiety, and sometimes I'll take myself out. So that was so true. And I love the disciplines. One thing that I really liked for me was the ticking off of when my attention starts slipping, because I'm all over the place at times. And if I have that little tick, I can really, as Missy said, it's a bit of control. It's something that I can anchor onto and catch before I go off and I'm going, where's my day? And I've been very busy, but not very productive. So that was a good one for me. But the whole book, I'm going to read this again, and I'm put in my smart shelf for sure, and reread this over and over and again, because there's so much meat here, so much meat.
Yeah.
And again, she makes it at the end kind of simple in that she says, just act, like just move into action, right? And then you don't fail. I mean, it's not that simple, but just move into action. So it's a great book. Thanks for referring this, because I'm gonna keep reading this one. This is one that I want to go back to every couple of months, and as Missy is doing now, doing those activities, those disciplines.
Wow.
So,
Thank you. You mentioned extrovert, and she offered two disciplines. One is, the practicing of silence or of talking not about yourself at all, right? And then another one, and this was especially revealing for people who tend to be, self-absorbed or whatever, is only talk about yourself, right? And see how that goes. So now we're turning the light on us. So we may have done it habitually or unconsciously, but now we're doing it deliberately, and we could see the folly in it. Wow. Yeah, that was really cool. The other thing Mark just mentioned, in summing up in chapter 12, of course, where she mentioned the guy who, when his back was right against the wall, suddenly, fate would come in and save the day, and it always worked. And she was like, well, he overlooked what was actually happening. Right. So now failure wasn't an option. He had to burn the boats. He had to move forward. And it worked. Okay. But do we have to have our back right against the wall? I think what she's talking about here is something, using other words, a high necessity level, right? An example that I've used sometimes with people who, were trying to get out of their own way, and for whatever reason kept tripping themselves up, is like the example of a burning building. Right. Well, what if your kids were in there? Are you going to stand around and Q&A and ask for people's opinions and, get a committee meeting going? Right. No, you're already in there. It's done. It's already done. Impossible to fail. So there it is. Do we have to have our back against the wall? No. Thank you. So beautiful stuff. Who else has some thoughts on this?
I'd like to chime in. I liked
Bob.
what Mark had to say. I liked, though, the paragraph that followed the one that he cited in chapter 10. And I'll just read it verbatim. Those executives and administrators who continually do far more than they can without incurring fatigue and irritability are frequently pandering to their own self-importance and conceit, although usually they would reject the charge with wrath. They are certainly allowing the will to fail to operate in their lives. It is good to extend one's normal activity till its capacity is reached, and that is far oftener much more than we habitually do, rather than less. But the tasks taken on thereafter are the first steps towards failure, towards that trouble, beloved of Americans, the nervous breakdown. Now, when was this book written? The 30s?
36.
Okay, so already the nervous breakdown had manifested itself in American society. And it's very telling. I do remember from many, many business courses that I've taken over the years, the person who says, if I weren't around to do things, nothing would get done. Well, that person is not saying what a good worker they are. They're saying what a poor manager they are or would be. So, and that's, I've been in that situation myself, where my hand is always up, give me the ball, let me take this. And before I know it, I'm in the situation that Mark kind of described where I'm all over the lot. And I'm typically not the person who's sort of all over the lot. I can be pretty focused at times, but I do know what it's like to have multiple demands on my time. And all of a sudden, bang, you got to prioritize. Because you're to that point where since everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Mm.
So, Mark, that was a great citation. I really, though, loved the paragraph that followed. It was a real eye opener. Took me back, took me forward.
Right, right. And I'm seeing in the chat here where Stuart is enthusiastic about your take on the whole having a code in chapter 10. Yeah. So I wasn't, at least not in this body, around in 1936. And I having grown up in the 70s and experiencing, I guess, well, at this point, it was in full bloom, the whole drug culture and psychiatry and people popping pills and the decline of purpose, I think, in the lives of many people. Dorothy had touched on it multiple times here, decades before I showed up on the scene. But the idea that we've been given the luxury of, navel gazing, of looking at, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and all of this equivocating with ourselves and coming up with theories that don't lead anywhere. Whereas I guess in older times, right, your life was being threatened 3 times a day by saber-toothed cats, and you didn't have time to navel gaze, right? So you're more on purpose. Now, they may have been simpler purposes, and maybe that's the answer for a lot of people, because what you just said, Bob, right? So if everything's a priority, nothing is, right? Well, when you're being chased by the saber-toothed cat, you got some focus right there. You're not like multitasking, right? Q&A, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe we need to have our lives threatened multiple times a day. Or maybe it doesn't have to be that state of desperation, back against the wall. Maybe it's just the ability to friggin' say no. No, that's it. I choose this. And these are my cause points where I can go be effective, right? Cause, effect. Here's where I shall have an effect. And here's where I shall forsake or just not participate because I choose this. That's a very interdirected and responsible approach to life. And yet, how many of us, because I think we've had so much opportunity to, and we're social, I get it, but so much opportunity to conform, we've done exactly that. We've conformed. And because it's okay for you, it's okay for me. There's that tacit consent, right? Here's that mediocrity. I won't hold you to account as long as you don't hold me to account, right? We can all be mediocre together and drink coffee and be social. Yeah. All right. Well, she even talked about it in here where you at the proper times, and I don't remember the exact words she used. Well, you go ahead. If you've got people who you keep around just because they will listen to you talk about nothing, right? And they're very agreeable, maybe go ahead at the appropriate time, create some distance there. Yeah. Who are you serving with that? Who else? Who else has some thoughts on these tremendous final chapters? Come on out, Stuart.
I got something to say about all this.
Yes, you do.
Oh my God. As someone who considers myself a man of principle, right? Chapter 10 kind of hits me, codes and standards. She starts out continuing with using imagination in either an office setting or with coworkers, and then later kind of gets into even like marriage and relationships and partnerships and defining codes of responsibilities and things that we share with each other. I was really expecting like, moral code and, code of conduct and, what did I write? Whatever, just the different types of codes that you would think of. But she's really in this situation, or at least in this chapter, she's talking about interpersonal working relationships, right? And those of us that are in relationships or have been in relationships, to me, this was just interesting to see her take on all that. She talks about using our imagination to determine where we can stand in the chain of causes. And I don't know if that stuck out to you, my brother, but of course I'm thinking causes and effects, right? Called law of cause and effect. And what's interesting is, the moment you talk about stoicism, I'm like, wow, Dorothea Brandt is kind of stoic in her writing. And so the Stoic definition of fate is a chain of causes that lead to a particular outcome or set of circumstances. And they talk about the chain of causes like the beads on a necklace that all have to be there, right? For Missy, as a Goddard fan, we talk about the bridge of incidents, right? The special perfect things that have to happen in order to create, whatever kind of magical finished product that we're talking about. And then, of course, she's saying we can use our imagination to gain perspective, to tackle problems from new angles, right? I appreciated that as somebody who always likes to get the 30,000 foot view of whatever it is I'm working on and step aside and get perspective. She says we can use imagination to envision our best work and ask ourselves, what does that look like? What would it be, right? That's just a cool exercise in and of itself, right? To enter the state of mind of our ideal customers. And John, immediately, I thought of Shannon and the avatars, right? Who's your avatar?
Mhm.
Who's your company or your customers, who's your business's ideal customer, right? We think of that as target market or whatever it is, but the idea of like an avatar, like putting a face on that person or whatever it is, I thought was cool. And then she's of course talking about getting in the head of, your ideal customer. I thought it was super cool. And then she's talking about, setting up a code of rules. And then, again, I was expecting more of like, something a little more detailed, right? And really she starts getting into like disgruntled coworkers and people that sabotage the collaborative effort because their feelings got hurt, because their idea didn't get heard or whatever it is, and like how to deal with people like that, and I'm not an office guy, so I was glad to kind of hear some of the dynamics on how that could work, in an office environment. So thanks for sharing that. And I guess that's ego and self-importance, right? And those are bigger topics. And then she talks about the importance of standards and that they should be well thought out and written down. And I immediately thought of core value statement, mission statement, vision statement. Like if you're running a business, like that's sort of how you answer the question of like, well, what kind of standards, do you have in your business, right? You start thinking about your core values, you start thinking about what your mission is and what your vision is. And of course, that really rang true for me as somebody who owns and runs an outdoor rec company. And of course, we do our best to operate within the highest of standards in our industry, right? And then that can be whatever it is. I think that's up to you in your business. And maybe that's part of like doing your own competitive analysis and like what sets you apart, right? Is, well, where are you going with this? Are you just trying to get by? Or are you trying to be the best, whatever it is that you do? So I think that's something cool that's different for everybody. And then I pulled up a Stoic quote from Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, that we need to constantly remind ourselves of the standards we set for ourselves and who it is that we aspire to be. So I thought that was very cool. With the disciplines, what I thought was interesting is she talks about that it's important to like, that we're in routines, we're governed by habits and disciplines. And while that, is good, and she even encourages us to do that in one of the 12 disciplines, it seems like she's encouraging us to like do our best to break free of habits and disciplines that they can be really rigid and restricting. She calls it mental training. And then of course, I don't know if, this stuck out to any of you, but when she talked about we've gotten soft and, too much media and, we don't expose ourselves to extremes of temperatures or whatever, and as parents, of course, we want our kids to get a little dirty and cold and experienced some of the extremes and things like that. Of course, in my career, it's all about sleeping on the ground and keeping people alive and warm and fed in extreme conditions. So all that stuff about getting out of your comfort zone. And then she said something about discipline and how culturally, even then, that there is an aversion to discipline, right? And of course, I looked it up. Diskoupolis in Greek or Latin is a student, a disciple, right? And the old version of that word is like super cool. It's only in the modern era that discipline has been more about punishment and hurting somebody. And so I remember being a parent of a younger kid, and all the parents were like, "Oh, we don't want to discipline our kids." And of course, all those kids, I was kind of in a hippie, post-commune scene out here, right? And parents were against discipline, and of course, most of those kids turned out to be little monsters. Guys, I put together a little document with the 12 disciplines in it. I'm loading it up in the chat. You can check it out if you like. It's just kind of putting it all together. It makes it nice and easy to look at. And then she drops Franklin's virtues. Right. And of course, I had to look that up. And so I found a cool document with the 13 Franklin virtues. I'm going to drag that in the chat. And then also the workbook page. Mark, you were talking about the checklists for every time you lose attention, right? I got interested when she was talking about Franklin's checklist of, making sure that he, did those things as much as possible. So anyway, I threw that in there for you guys. And then in chapter 13, she says two things I thought were really cool. She talks about the reductio ad absurdum, right? The ridiculous argument that just because you can do good work under fire means that the only way that you can do good work is under fire, right? And this concept of absurd logic or whatever. And then she says some sine qua non, right? And that's the essential quality of success. And that was like, boom, courage facing in the right direction. I want to hear what you have to say about what the right direction is in terms of courage, but without which not. And if anybody's a lawyer in the group, there's a whole legal thing about sine qua non, which is the law of causes, boom, back to causes, where this could not have happened but for these things happening, right? Super cool. Dorothea, boom.
Boom. Beautiful stuff. I had to look up the sine qua non. It's not something I use in modern parlance. Awesome stuff, man. Awesome. Anybody else? Some thoughts on this? Anybody else?
When she talks about like a girl's finishing school, and apparently they taught them to, before they enter the room, this really struck me. I don't know, maybe because I'm a girl, but don't just run into the room. Pause. Stop yourself. See what you're going into. See where the hostess is. See who the most important guest is. Or if you can't, if they're busy, look for the oldest person. Manners. And control yourself before you go into the room. And don't go in like the Three Stooges, boy, if we could just bring these things back to the world, the world would change on a dime. We've thrown it all away, and she brought it back. She didn't bring it back. She, you know what I'm trying to say. She listed it out for us, and it's still here. And anyone can partake and live this way at any time. And believe me, I'm going to start doing that. And I love her. I wish I could meet her and talk to her. She probably slapped me in the face, but
yeah, right. That's great.
Just to piggyback what Missy said, while I was reading this, I kind of went back and did some research in relation to the 30s. There was some heavy books written in the 30s, both fiction and nonfiction. I mean, I just a quick list. There's Brave New World, Murder on the Orient Express, Gone with the Wind, The Hobbit, Anthem, Ayn Rand. I'm a fan of Ayn Rand. The Grapes of Wrath, and then of course Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, and now this wonderful book that was just given to us. I mean, there's something going on, Missy, there that you're right, that we've lost, and they had it. You know, they tapped into it and they shared it with the world. And I reflected on that when I was reading this. It was kind of cool going, man, they had it in the 30s, or at least they were tapping into something. And it's almost like we're losing it. And we need to get that back. And reading stuff, you know, books like this and the greats, you know, that I just alluded to. Yeah, we're in good hands if we tap back into the 30s, because there's some great books written then. I just want to
They
share.
were tapping back even further. And
Mhm.
the founders tapped back to Marcus Aurelius and Cicero, and they tapped back to the Greeks, and, you know.
Yeah,
so it's-
absolutely.
But they write it. Bob once told me, Bob gave me a book once, and I said, I don't want to read this biography. I like the older biography. And he said, every generation has something different to say. And so he you know, he made me have a different point of view. I didn't want to hear anything that I might not want to hear, you know, but it's got to be said. And through John and these books, we're saying it. And I'm so grateful. There are no words to express. I'm trying to put these things into practice little by little. And if I could, the exercise where she says a half an hour of thinking on one physical object, but she says for beginners, how about 5 minutes? I can't do 5 seconds. My mind is, I need, the cone of silence for my brain. I don't know. Somebody help me. I need to, it's been a problem for a long time.
This, what Missy just said about the focusing for half an hour. Has anybody in the group done a set of exercises that's called Vision Pursue? Have you heard of it, John?
No.
Anybody? Vision Pursue is something that our firm had us go through maybe a year and a half ago. And the idea was to focus on what you were doing, all right? And it essentially was a lot of breathing exercises, a lot of meditating exercises to get you simply to focus. And the catalyst for all this was, believe it or not, the 2016 Chicago Cubs, who for the first time in 108 years went to a World Series and won it. And evidently the manager that year of the Cubs, I forget who it was, had actually adopted this. And many other sports teams had adopted it as well. The Lakers did in their heyday in the 1990s, other NBA teams later. But it was simply a matter of focusing and using certain exercises to keep yourself in the present. And just speaking on a larger scale, more of an observation than anything, I have a feeling that we, as a culture, as a society, we are suffering from like corporate ADD. That no one can keep their focus on anything for any appreciable period of time. And Missy actually dropped one of your gems, John, the shiny object syndrome. You get distracted by the shiny object. So these principles, and then thank you, Stuart, for recapitulating them and sharing them with the group. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. It ties in, it taps into what people are now discovering about Vision Pursue and about focus. Wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. You know, I've got a couple of things that jumped out at me as well, as you can imagine, having been through this book a few times. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And a lot of this stuff was already covered just because obviously we're all reading the same book. But this whole idea of that chain of causes, which Stuart brought up, you know, so no man is an island, right? We've got the ability to do our own work, but how about cooperation? And she brings that up here, and some ways to gauge that, not with anxiety, but with imagination. But this is where I think, as an entrepreneur and as somebody who's been in sales and marketing for a long time, the perspective of my customer, the ultimate consumer of whatever production I'm involved in right now. But here's the warning that she gives. Yeah, it's true that if you look exclusively to please others, what's the old saying? The sure way to failure is to, try and please everybody. Okay. But if you require like recognition for your work and an agreement, essentially, in other words, you're looking to sell something, well, perhaps you can offer something even better to these non-professionals. They don't know. It reminded me of something Henry Ford said. He said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a better horse. Right. So, so go be the professional with the end consumer in mind. And here's some barometers that she gives us with that. And this is, I believe Bob opened up with this idea, right? These people who believe themselves overworked, right? So I won't cover it again. But this kind of struck me. Many of those who believe they have given up their own ideas and are working along other lines will unconsciously go on obstructing and objecting, holding up the work, trying to defeat its ends. Has anyone here had a coworker or someone who felt scorned because their ideas weren't taken up, or the group didn't agree, and now they seem to be like an anchor, like kind of they got to be dragged on reluctantly to do the other work? Well, she also offers in here that because they're not just in agreement, in blind agreement with everyone, maybe they've got perspectives that can definitely serve the group. So on one hand, here's the anchor person who seems to be slowing things down. But if we can look objectively, maybe they've got some imagination on this that we can also, in present time, see if there's merit. Right. So this takes a good amount of consciousness to do. Like Missy said before, it's not necessarily easy. And this book wasn't, offered as, here's the 3 quick tips to make your life perfect or whatever. Right. There's definitely some effort involved with all this. All right. So where's the balance? I think right here, there's always the possibility of sudden illumination, of belated growth, which will be endangered if you take upon yourself more than you should. So balance, that's something that, for anyone who's been hanging around with me for a while, I don't claim to be like the expert at that, but for this, it seems like it's something I need to give some attention to, rather than being just 100% habitual, staying open to ways to advance that could challenge some of my habits. So habits are definitely good. Okay. But can we optimize? Not if I'm just engrossed in my habitual way of thinking and behaving. So it causes me to think, it causes me to stretch, just like she talked about going to the gym and increasing those muscles through resistance, frustration, whatever. I'm now going to get bigger, stronger, faster. Moving into the 12 disciplines. She's got this whole preamble here where we apply the routine observing tendency to our whole lives, growing mentally and spiritually more flaccid, more timorous, less experimental with every day we spend, supported by the rigidity of habit. So this is where I'm kind of like wrestling with. And like Mark, I'm going to have to read this again. I've only read this book 3 or 4 times. So it gets more real for me as I find ways to use it. The exercise of the adaptive functions appears to be indispensable to the optimum development of man, said Dr. Carroll. We have allowed ourselves to soften, to abandon our ingenuity, to escape responsibility wherever possible. Now, whenever somebody accuses me of irresponsibility, I take note, right? Because I know that's a killer. Till we grow to fear and abhor the very word discipline. Now, this is pretty accusatory. All right. I'm not going to own this. Okay. Other people can. I think she's talking in a general sense, being a bit critical of, where people have allowed themselves to really get soft. And with whatever excuses or justifications. All right. But the idea here, and I think we're all engaged in this, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be showing up in this conversation. The idea that we can allow ourselves to stretch and go beyond just whatever is running on autopilot so that we can maximize and optimize. That's what this is saying to me. But whose responsibility is it to do that? Nobody can do that for me, whether we're talking about working in groups or whatever recognition we may or may not get in the marketplace. This is a very inner-directed, self-directed kind of a thing. So what are these disciplines? Oh, I like here that she said none of them is arbitrary in the sense of pointless. And she'll go deeper into this later. Each develops our strengths and strengthens a faculty of the mind, which should be kept in good condition if a life is to be led purposefully and under one's own control. And isn't that what we want? Control, freedom, causation, the fulfillment of purpose. Not all of them will be equally valuable to all cases, but before rejecting any one of them, examine yourself to discover if you are not possibly throwing it aside simply because it does not, because it does ask you to put a little more restraint on yourself than you find pleasurable. Okay. Okay, you got me. Let's jump in. Bob, did you have a comment on this?
Yeah, well, there's something that you passed over. I'm sure was not deliberate, but right there, stop right there. The next to last paragraph on the screen, last sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom, says Aristotle, is obedience to self-formulated rules. That, I think, needs to be engraved somewhere and, put in, make it a mug, right? There's your challenge.
Okay.
That's a beautiful sentiment because, first of all, freedom is obedience. That's kind of a dichotomy, not tautology, but a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom is obedience, but it's obedience to rules that you formulate yourself. And if you are living an upright and well-ordered life, who can begrudge you that freedom? This is
Well, I'll
really
tell you
important.
who. There are people who would rather control your life than allow you to do so. And as long as people stay soft, then others will rush in and snatch up that control, right? And we talked about this in Integrity is Everything in the chapter on It's Not Okay. But Aristotle is, I think, right. I mean, obedience to self-formulated rules. What are we talking about here? Freedom, self-determinism. Okay. So if you don't exercise that self-determinism, well, then you're the effect, right?
Someone will do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing to talk about what you want. It's another thing to give yourself a command and then follow it. Right. And we could sit around and gripe about, conditions and circumstances and outside influences. But a lot of the people that have the time, the luxury of time to sit around and gripe, have given away their self-determinism on that. So who's responsible? This is the question that, and again, for anyone here who's been hanging around the mastermind group for a while, it's a question I think of all the time is what part of this can I be responsible for? I'm not an island, okay, but what part of this, whatever this is that we're talking about, can I be responsible for? Great question. So before we go ahead and dismiss any of these things, thank you again, Bob. Let's go ahead and just try them on. Just try them. And then Stuart very nicely enumerated these on what looks like a piece of parchment. Thank you, Stuart. You even picked very nice yellowed stationery, so it's not just stark white. Did you guys download the little thing Stuart made? Thank you, sir. That's got a lot of character. All right, so we're going to spend an hour a day without saying anything except in answer to direct questions. Okay. Now, how about for us that are online, right? So, I mean, I could sit there quiet and nobody's asking me questions except I suppose, my emails and whatever. So maybe this is easier for me. Am I dismissing this just by thinking, maybe this doesn't apply to me, right? So maybe if we were more, like at the coffee shop or something, we could try this on a little bit more directly. Number 2, learn to think for half an hour a day exclusively on one subject. What did Einstein say? If one could focus their entire energy on a problem for 2 minutes, not only would they solve the problem, they would be a genius. Okay, so she's talking about a half hour. And then I think Mark mentioned the little, tick marks, where, I got distracted. And then ultimately that, that notebook of your little check marks will be empty because you will have learned to discipline the mind. Huge benefits to this. Write a letter without once using the following words: I, me, and mine. So when I'm in my email, okay, I'm responding to someone and letting them know what happens. I notice how often I use I. especially at the beginning of a sentence. Now, because most people don't read, like this book is written in full paragraphs. Okay. So this is not good for marketing, in case you're wondering, right? When you write emails, you want white space, you want like brief thoughts, double, return double line, right? And then the next line. And I look at how does each line start? And if I see that it starts with the word I or I'm or I will, right? Something like that, I find a different way to word it.
Mm.
Right? Even if I'm committing to a customer that I will process the order, I will, right? I find another way to word it. So we'll make sure that this is processed, or processing will be completed, by the end of the day, right? Rather than saying I became, and maybe it was Dorothea that made me aware of that, but I look at how often do I refer to myself. Also in videos. This is something that actually my wife, my secret weapon, Shannon, she advised me once. She was watching some of my videos where I talk about the principle and how I applied it into my life. And she said, you know what, your viewer doesn't give a shit about, how you applied it into your life, but what's in it for them. Right. So now talking from a marketing perspective, you, Mr. Customer, will find use with this idea, this tool, this product, or whatever it is, right? Talk to you. And it's not use, it's not plural, it's you, the one and only viewer, which happens to be thousands of people, hopefully, right, watching the video, but it's you and only you that I'm talking to now. So that was a corrective that came up for me in multiple ways. So huge wins on number 3, at least for me. Number 4, talk for 15 minutes a day without using, all right, so same story. Number 5, write a letter in a successful or placid tone. I was a little vague on this. Of course, being in the space that I'm in and the work that I do, I know a lot of people on social media, which Facebook was down for like 6 hours today. That's interesting. Wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, which I don't use. But a lot of people enjoy, I guess, sympathy, right? Look at me, look at my problems. I'm a victim, or whatever the conversation is. So in a successful or placid tone. I thought it was interesting that she would use those 2 words together in a sentence, placid. Okay. So there's that. I find that one comes easy for me. Number 6, pause on the threshold. This is what Missy was talking about. I pictured in my mind some very proper, young lady who had finished finishing school. I don't know what that is. I guess it's something
Grace
cool.
Kelly type.
Right,
Grace
right.
Kelly.
Yeah, there you go. And at the precipice, they pause to assess, and then they make their entrance. Right. I thought that's kind of cool. I could do that. I don't know if I need to curtsy or whatever, but to to assess. All right, who am I about to confront? Who am I about to encounter in this grand entrance? And then being purposeful about that. Number 7, keep a new acquaintance talking about himself or herself without allowing him to become conscious of what you are doing. For me, do it all the time. Easy. So, but again, maybe that's just, having been in the space that I've been in for so long. Number 8, and this is where I think, Mark, you brought this up, the exact opposite of the above exercises, and infinitely harder to do with intention. Yeah. Talk exclusively about yourself. Ooh, this is, I'm getting all,
I'm afraid
my
of that.
stomach's churning just thinking about it. Oh, you do that. Yeah. So there's that. All right. So the correction of the I mean, or literally, or and so those sort of wasteful, wasting your breath kind of stuff takes cooperation. Somebody hold me to account on that. Plan 2 hours a day and live according to the plan. Just 2 hours. Now, I've admitted often that if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. The only reason I showed up here today on time, in fact, a couple minutes early, is because it was on my calendar. I have to be according to plan. But I like where she said here, the point is to turn from one activity to the next, not at the approximate minute of your schedule, but on the exact moment. So there's some discipline. The policy around here is if you can't be on time, be early. Okay. And where did I get that from? I got that from actually gun training school, where, here's the lecture hall where we're going to get some theory. Okay. And here's 300 students or whatever. And the director of training said, look, if I waste 1 minute here, I'm not wasting 1 minute. I'm wasting 1 times 300 people. That's 300 minutes wasted. We start exactly on time. Exactly. I'm like, oh, now I get it. All right. So do with that what you will. Number 11, the most difficult of all, it is arbitrary, and that's its very essence. So here's some arbitrary instructions to get out of my comfort zone and just go do it. Whether you want to or not. Now it's time to do the arbitrary thing every other week, she said, right? Is that what she said? Every other week
Or once a
or on a
month.
given day of each month, pick one of the envelopes, open it, and perform your own command. That'll mix things up. And then, of course, number 12, from time to time, give you a day in which you say yes. Anybody ever seen the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey? Yes Man. He goes to like a self-help seminar, and the grandmaster there is all about yes, right? You say yes to life, you say yes to everything. And of course, Jim Carrey, in his act, he takes it to the extreme, says yes to everything, and his life becomes an adventure, and it's a fun comedy and everything else. But Yes Man, great movie. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. Here's some of that inventory. Ben Franklin, right? Yeah, and so here's giving ourselves commands. I read a book. In fact, I've mentioned it before. Rhinoceros Success by Scott Alexander. This was written in 1980. It was targeting people in the home business professions like network marketing and stuff, where he talked about being a rhino and not a cow, just grazing on the pasture and chewing your cud and waiting for the slaughter, but being a rhino and charging. I can't wait to get out of bed and charge in the morning, right? Damn the torpedoes. And so this reminded me of that, right? So here's the character written by Catherine Mansfield. I don't know who the character was, but he opened his eyes and saw the sign that he had put up for himself. Get out of bed at once. Good. I'll take the reminders. Get into the habit of being both strict and friendly toward yourself. So all of this is not designed to berate ourselves. All of this is designed to be friendly but strict with ourselves. Because look, the rewards are there for failure or for success. You can go ahead and be deliberate about that. And that's worth rewarding. To conclude, the best of luck. We have different meanings for that now here in this group, but I know what she meant by this. We act by ignoring all memories or apprehensions of failure, by refusing to attach importance to temporary discomfort or past pain. So who's attaching importance to it? So you mean I get to choose that? Oh, so I'm not a victim. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. We deliberately make for ourselves an invigorating mental climate. And in this atmosphere, freed of doubts and anxieties, we act. So this is the essence of the entire book, right? Or as Wayne Dyer said, to develop a forgettery to go along with our memory. All right. So now I am going to go ahead and cancel, reset, forgive, forsake, abandon those things which caused me pain in the past. I will act smartly. Yes, I do have reason, right? That is another mental faculty. Okay, but I also have imagination. I can see where I'm going, and I can act as if it were impossible to fail. Purposeful action seems quicker. Oh, I love this. I love this. Think of the word indecision as I read this final quote here. Indecision. All right, now listen to this. Purposeful action seems quicker, clearer, more straightforward, and enjoyable than any other. In reality, you may be working more slowly and carefully than ordinarily. Still, the fact that there is no confusion of issues, no part of your mind off wool gathering as you move, gives an unmistakable tone to the activities which are being carried on in the proper way. Contrast that with indecision, not sure, not getting done, slow, procrastination, right? Versus purposeful, decided, finite action. Completely different worlds, right? So what she's saying here to me, is be decisive. No more, maybe it doesn't work. Full intention, no counter intention, full postulate, no counter postulate, right? Forward. We look forward. That's it. Oh, I got a couple more things I highlighted here. So let us for another reductio ad absurdum. I think this was already quoted, right? So here's the guy who, gained courage out of having his back against the wall. He came to believe that the prospect of utter vanquishment would each time cause fate to relent. What he entirely overlooked was that when he had reached such straits that he dared not fail, he invariably acted as he should always act, as if it were impossible to fail. The end. I love this. I love this book. Oh my goodness. Any other thoughts on this before we wrap up? Mark?
It's an awesome book. That's all.
Yeah.
That's an awesome book. And, I'm going to share this with some of my clients, some of the CEOs that I have, because this is, this is good. I'm glad that you brought this to light. So thank you. That's all I want.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Janet?
Hello. So I have studied dance. You guys know my calligraphy, things like that. These all require discipline. And Martha Graham, and she's probably not the first, very famously, freedom through discipline. You're not talking about something terrible. You're talking about repeated movements, repeated whatever it is that we're doing, so that you don't have to make decisions about it. You know what needs to be done. You know what the path is, and you have practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And through that discipline of practicing, of working on your mind, whatever it is, you now have freedom on top of it. Otherwise, you're always struggling and struggling and struggling. So if you can get yourself into a place where you are, where it becomes, to say habitual, but it's not even that, because you're still aware of it and thinking of it. It's not just a knee-jerk thing, but you are in such a place as it's there. You don't have to, you know how to move your arm, you know what to do. You don't have to, think it through each time. It becomes something through your discipline that you understand what needs to be done. And then that gives you the freedom on top of it to be able to go where you need to go, or where your imagination is leading you, or anything like that. It's not a bad word, it's a good word. Okay. So that's just that viewpoint.
Thank you. Janet, just a few nights ago, I had an opportunity to hear a master pianist at work, and he did a few jazz numbers and some classical, and then he talked a bit about, it was a lecture involved as well. He talked a bit about improvisation, which I've not achieved in music anyway, right? I can noodle and figure out, that sounds good, but whatever. But some of these like jazz musicians, they know the language of their instruments so well that they could just improvise. And so he said, would you guys like me to make up a song right now? Maybe it's good, maybe it's crap, I don't know. And everybody was like, yeah, let's hear it. And so he just started playing, and it went a couple different directions, and it was this, it was that, it was music. It wasn't just noise. And no one had ever heard that before, not even him. And it just came out. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is the height of mastery right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That, because you've got it, you've got the bases, you've got all of the stuff down. And so when that happens and you don't have to think, you can play on top of it. And that's, jazz especially, is you've got that basis and you're playing in and out and on top, and having a good time with it, having fun with it. You're not having to think about the basic stuff, right? You have the freedom to play. And, if in our businesses and things, we've got it down. We know what's expected. We know what we expect of ourselves. We know how to formulate it, whatever it is that we're working on. Then comes the fun, because then comes the time when you can say, okay, well, what if I try this or I try that? And it's not such a heavy thing. It's just like, let me play with this. Let me see what I can come up with, and it becomes the fun that we want it to be. It becomes the freedom that we want it to be. And oh, hello, Catherine's cat.
Hey, look at that cat.
and it makes it fun. It makes life worth living at that point, because you don't have to stress all the time.
Right. That's so beautiful. You know what? I guess to give ourselves some credit, right? How many of us have recognized in our lives where we have achieved a state of mastery in some practice, right? I could tell you what it is for me, and it happens multiple times a day, right? It's communications, it's selling, right? In fact, just today, Shannon was like, I'm busy. I got this client. Can you go ahead and take the client? I took the client, and then hours later, she came back and said, oh, did you talk to the client? I was like, yeah. What happened? I said, they bought everything. And she's like, yeah, of course they did. And that was it. Right. So done. I mean, I don't even have to think about that. So what is it that you've accomplished? I know I lean on Stuart a lot with this, because he's not as common of a case as many, right? He knows like the wilderness, survival stuff and the ways of, trekking through the jungle with the llama. I mean, he knows that stuff instinctively. I remember a time, and I know we're on a bit of a tangent here, but I don't see any other people unmuted or with their hands up. But I remember a time where the llamas got out of the pen or the corral or what have you, and Stuart instinctively knew what to do to reroute the llamas back to where they had to go. And as I recall, Stuart, the answer was to get that head llama, the one that the others tend to follow. All you got to do is influence that one, and the others will be influenced indirectly or secondarily. Done. And that was like in the middle of the winter. He was out there in his underwear or something, like herding llamas, right? Almost effortlessly. Slippers in a bathrobe. Yeah, there you go. I wouldn't have known what to do. That's it. You're screwed, man. The llamas are down the street. Right. But he knows.
But that's the thing, man. I mean, it's like whatever you do, especially the older you get and the longer you've been doing something, you better be damn good at whatever it is that you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And and each of us in our own way, we have our own specialized skill set. We were talking about calligraphy this morning with Janet, right? And so it's like what she says about success in the book, right? That it's your own definition, and then nobody can define it for you, and it's doing what you do best, right? So yeah, okay, I spent almost 30 years, leading groups in the wilderness and dealing with pack animals and the unscripted life, let's say, and danger around every corner or whatever it is. But I give so much props to you. I don't know if you saw I threw it in the chat, but just you're like, oh, I don't know how to improv, dude. You improv every day, and I remember last year, leading whether it was general sessions or anything else, and I put hours and hours into prep, and I got to have the visuals and the slideshows and this and that, and just I give you so much props for just putting yourself out there and maybe not even knowing what you're going to talk about until you talk about it. So props to you, my brother.
Thank you. And I did acknowledge myself for that. So thank you. I don't want to overlook that. Yeah, I've got skills. It's just not on the guitar or tickling the ivories or whatever. I'll tell you who's got some skills. Virginia Pipitone with those Italian cookies. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so you take my hand down, I'll take my hand down. Right. You got me to unmute and show my face when you told the Stuart story about the llamas, because I remember that day that he told us that story. Absolutely. And he was out in his pajamas or whatever. But another story, the reason you got me out is because I used Stuart as an example for my 9-year-old grandson when I say, he knows where everything is in his backpack in the dark. Yeah, because he has to know exactly where the knife, the map, the rope, the this, the that, the first aid kit is. Everything has to be packed in the same way. I guess maybe like you roll a parachute or something, because your life can depend on it.
Right.
in the dark. And so I use you as an example for my 9-year-old. And then also Linda and I, thank you, you're welcome. Linda and I going to Vegas. We're gonna have purses with less pockets. So we don't have to remember what pocket we put something in. So just maybe 2 pockets and that's it. It was either in the bag or it's on the side of the bag, because all these purses that have all these different pockets, like a backpack, 10 times you're looking for it. And we're not like Stuart. We're not like put it always back in the same place all the time.
Oh, see that, Stuart, people are getting mileage out of your teachings and you didn't even know it. So there you go.
We love you, man.
So good. All right, my friends, we're at the top of the hour. Any closing thoughts? Anybody else who didn't get to share, who is going to spontaneously combust if you don't release your intention? No, we're good. Everybody's good. Okay. Well, love you guys. Quick announcement. So we're starting Atomic Habits, which I've not read. Okay. So I am going to read it. Hopefully we all are, but I'm going to be at an exclusive dinner on next Monday night with Virginia, who just spoke, and some of the others who are getting together with us in the Las Vegas area. So Stuart is going to be hosting next week. So what do you think? First 3 chapters, Stuart? I haven't even looked at the book yet. So maybe cover it in a month. It's a standard like 200-page book. So maybe 4 weeks on that book. So
Sounds
first,
good. I haven't read it either. And yeah, if you want
Okay.
to do 3 chapters, we'll do chapters 1, 2, and 3 for next week. And we'll keep the fire burning until you guys get back. Enjoy your in-person gathering. That sounds so
Yeah.
cool. I'm not quite ready to travel. I'd love to go, but I encourage anybody that is a part of the group to go to Vegas here in the US.
Awesome. Well, thank you for holding down the fort, Stuart. So everybody tune in next week with Stuart. First couple of chapters there of Atomic Habits. In the meantime, I will see you all again real soon.